Welcome everyone on this snowy day in Southern Ontario anyway. We'll get started because I know there's a lot of information to go through. So a little bit about myself. I'm a speech and language pathologist. I also have a Master's of Education in Curriculum, and I'm a board certified behavior analyst. I have specialized training in assistive devices and AAC, hence why I'm giving this talk today, as well as the picture exchange communication system, pediatric feeding disorders, and conflicts of interest to declare. I'm a salaried employee of Autism Ontario and a clinical advisor for Lingo. So I just want to go over a couple things about how I will be presenting. So our language statements is one of them, and there's two different types of way of referring to autism or people with autism. One is autistic identity first, so autistic person. The other one's person first, so saying person with autism. And I'm going to be using both terms interchangeably during the presentation to be respectful to all the attendees and stakeholders and understand that people have a right to choose any label. So the agenda today, a brief review of AAC. We're going to look at pros and cons of different AAC systems, the skills that are needed for each system, how to do an assessment for AAC, and look at some resources and supports. So what is AAC? We talked about this in part one in lots more detail. I'm going to whip through this section, although I know there's a significant number of people here today that weren't here last week or 2 weeks ago. So what is AAC? AAC is called augmentative. So there's two types, augmentative and alternative. It is called augmentative when it's used to supplement or add to or clarify your spoken message. Excuse me. So things like eye contact, gestures, facial expressions, and things that we do when we're commonly interacting with others. AAC is alternative when it's used to replace spoken language. And the images you'll see are like picture exchange communication system, sign language, or some high-tech devices. And it's not there. So who would benefit from AAC? Approximately 25 to 50% of individuals with autism remain minimally verbal throughout their lives. So they have little functional or no functional speech at all. So those are the people that we're talking about today. And there are other types of AAC systems. So I just want to briefly let you know how they're classified in case you hear about this from your speech and language pathologist or your behavior analyst or your AAC specialist. There's unaided systems, so things like gestures, vocalization, facial expressions, you don't need any materials. And sign language is, you know, the broadest system that we can think of like that. And then there's aided systems where you do need materials or tools to assist that method of communicating. So very familiar ones are picture exchange communication system, things like Flip and Talk, and there's others such as Lamp Words for Life, Proloquo to Go, and Lingo. So there's a lot of different types of AAC systems where you need pictures or technology, actual electronics. So which system is best? The primary goal of the field of AAC is to support communication and participation for individuals with complex communication needs. So those are the people that we're really talking about in this 5-part series. And we're really talking about using systems, technology, other materials to support their participation through communication, which is a basic fundamental human right. So very important. And what does the research say? And again, this is going to be the next couple slides, a synopsis of what we covered in part one. But it says that AAC intervention alone may not help speech develop in individuals with limited speech imitation skills. So if your child or your student cannot imitate speech, they're really having trouble with that, then AAC alone may not help them increase their speech production. And remember today, and for this series, we're talking about individuals who are autistic. So not broader groups, not individuals with Down syndrome or acquired brain injury or traumatic brain injury, because the research says different things for them. But this is particularly, all this research is about individuals with autism. So it also says that those with limited speech imitation skills, if you add components that target speech sound development, you may have better speech acquisition. So you may have to think of it as a separate program. So you may have your communication program, and then you have your speech therapy program or your speech imitation program. And so that's often what is recommended. Also, the research is pretty clear at this point that if you're using AAC, you may have to, or you should be using behavioral methods such as differential reinforcement, delay reinforcement, speech imitation prompting, in order to maintain the speech that your child or student already has and or to increase speech. So by using behavioral methods, we actually can use the AAC system, use those behavioral methods, and that may lead to better speech. At least it will lead to maintaining speech. And so this is a bit different than the research in the field of AAC that has been a field since the 1920s, and really looking at what do we need to do for this particular group of individuals. We also look at what does the research say about, some beliefs. So on the left-hand side, those dark orange boxes are current beliefs. And on the right-hand side, I put what does the research actually say at this point. So a current belief is AAC will not hinder speech development. That's not entirely true with the autistic population, but it doesn't guarantee that speech will develop either. So you have to really think about what is your individual like and what is your priority. And speech is always a priority for all parents. And it's something that, again, you may have to use AAC, and then you may have to work on speech at the same time. Another belief is that children don't need to match pictures or understand pictures or receptively identify pictures before they're using AAC. That is true because some of the systems will teach this, but a learner does need to have good visual skills. There is benefit to having good matching skills and good understanding of language and knowing what pictures represent prior to introducing an AAC system. Another belief is that children do not have to start with low-tech systems, which is that, picture pointing or picture exchange communication system before using a high-tech system. And I would posit, or I would present to you, that a good question to ask yourself is, why would you not want to consider the current skill set of your child or your student? Because that's really where you want to start. You want to start where their skill set is. And so a lot of times there has been research now that shows that if you use a low-tech system like picture exchange, if you go to end of phase 3, which then will tell you that your child understands pictures, understands what they represent, and it is really good with their visual skills and accurate with their skills, then they will make a really smooth transition. So think about your individual that you are working with or your child that you have. The last one is that there are no cognitive or behavioral prerequisites to using a speech generating device. And that's a belief that's said often, kind of around the world actually, but I hear it a lot here in Ontario. And that's actually not true at this time. There is no research to support that there aren't prerequisite skills. So in other words, there are prerequisite skills for using speech generating devices. When this statement came to be, there were no tech available for communication. So we're really looking at post-1980. From 1980 on, technology has come onto the scene, and there are definite prerequisite skills to using technology. And we will talk about that more in this session today. And just to underscore what the research currently is talking about and what we should be thinking about when we're looking at AAC, Laura et al. In a 2015 article said that the research really isn't about iPads or speech generating devices, but rather it is about the combination of the hardware, the software, and your training protocols. All three have to work together to provide support for the individual. And I can't stress how important the training component is. There have been numerous studies, and in fact one in Canada as well, that show that 60% of individuals who are prescribed a communication device abandon the use of it. And almost always it's because the people that are implementing have not been trained. And something that we talked about last time that I think I really should repeat is that when you're working with individuals with autism, they have not acquired their first language. They were immersed in a language of the home. They had trouble acquiring it. Their systems are neurodiverse, so their systems are different. And so now you're tasked with teaching a first language. None of us know how to teach a first language really well. That's why it takes a lot of people. It takes a lot of training. It takes people who have experience in teaching language. It takes people who have experience in teaching through different systems. So you're tasked with teaching a first language that none of us remember how we acquired our first language. And so really it's very different when we're talking about AAC. So which AAC system is best? Big question. We're going to look at the pros and cons of each type of augmentative or alternative communication system that's currently available. The choice of type of communication system is also impacted by, one, the individual's strengths, challenges, their preferences, their neurodiversity, the culture they're in, and the family's values and culture. So you have to take, as part of evidence-based practice, you have to take those things into account. And it actually shouldn't be based only on research, and it shouldn't be based only on the clinician's wishes or their experience. If the clinician or the provider you're working with lacks the experience or training in AAC for autism, and especially if there's a system that matches your child the best or your student the best, then that provider should get mentorship, additional training, or refer to someone that has that skill set. So really when we're looking at assessment and intervention and implementation of AAC for individuals with autism, we're talking about evidence-based practice, which means you have to have multiple factors you're looking at and then move to assessment before you decide. So we're going to look at that assessment piece now. So sign language as an AAC system. No equipment's needed. Remember, it's an unaided system, but there are some basic skills. The individual requires good fine motor skills, good motor imitation skills, and yes, everybody implementing that system that's teaching or implementing or training needs to be trained. And sign language is pretty difficult language. There are reports of upwards of 30% or 33% of typical individuals have trouble acquiring sign language. And so it's something that you may want to think about. And I'm going to go to the next one to finish off the row. I couldn't fit it all on one page. Is sign language durable as a system? Yeah. Is it portable? Yes, but has a limited audience, so you need to think about that. There are no voice output, obviously, and there's different types of sign language depending on your culture, where you live. And there are other things you have to consider is that there are classes for teaching online. Some of them are free, so you could get some training on sign language. Then we'll go back to picture exchange, so PACS, picture exchange communication system. You need equipment, so there's a number of things you have to buy. There are prerequisite skills for that, hand and arm skills, visual skills. Training, again, is needed. You need to be trained in that system. It is very systematic and manualized, and you should follow it to get best outcomes. It's an easy system to be trained in and use. And for PACS, good durability, good portability. You can use photos, so real life representation, and you can use different languages with picture exchange. There is an expense for the training component, and there's expenses in printing and laminating and velcroing the pictures. For picture-based systems, again, picture cards, you need some materials. You need some pointing skills. So if your autistic child or student is not able to use a really well-defined point, then you might want to think about that if you're trying to think about a picture pointing system. Again, imitation skills, visual skills, and that's because you're going to be demonstrating things and modeling things, and they need to be able to imitate you. You need training. It's pretty easy to moderate sometimes to implement. It depends on the individual and how large your picture board is. But it's very good durability, fair portability. These are often large boards, sometimes used by people who have to have mobility issues, so they're mounted on a wheelchair, but it's pretty hard to be portable with that kind of system. Again, you can use photos and different languages, and it's difficult to limit with a picture pointing board repetitive movements or self-stimulatory behavior. And so sometimes it can be difficult to figure out, is the individual communicating, or is this just a self-stimulatory behavior and it's not meant for communication? And in the last one, class of systems is speech generating devices, which is probably one of the ones that are used the most nowadays. You do need equipment. You need hardware, you need software, you need accessories. You need a strap to carry it, you need protective coverings, you need a protective case, you may need external speakers. So there's a lot of different things that go with a speech generating device. Again, you're going to need some basic prerequisite skills for this one. Good fine motor skills for doing all of the access, good imitation skills to benefit from modeling, those visual skills to understand the difference in pictures, and listening skills if you think that the audio output is going to be effective for your individual. Yes, you need training. Again, you need training for implementing AAC, and the ease of use can be from easy to moderate to sometimes, I would even venture to say sometimes it's significant to implement depending on the system you're thinking of. And fair durability. So point, if there is significant behavior in your child or in the student you're supporting, then it's probably best to delay using an electronic device initially and transition from something else to that later. It's expensive, a speech generating device. You need a lot of programming and customization. I'll go back. And you really want to think about those things before you enter into purchasing that. So do we have any? I don't see any questions yet, so I'm going to keep going. So again, this is just a different way to look at each system. So in each of these 4 different circles you're going to see, it tells you the selection skills. So how do you use that? Other skills you need to consider. Things that may impact, so delay to the item or activity, those barriers or could be barriers, and access barriers. Let you just read these are more for your individual information. Again, for PECs, you'll see that there's selection skills, there's other skills that may impact, there's delays or barriers that you may find with your child or student, and then access. What does access look like? So they have to turn pages, carry the binder. And in picture-based systems, again, what are you thinking about in terms of selection skills, those other skills, barriers, and access, and speech generating devices? And as you see, as we've gone along, all of these little boxes have increased in the number of different impacts that there may be when you're choosing specific systems. So let's get to the meat of what is an AAC assessment. So what are the steps in a good AAC assessment? And there are many. So this is where I know parents, some of you are trying to do this on your own. It's best if you have a team. It's best if you have a speech pathologist or behavior analyst that has some competency in this. But these are the things to look for when you're doing an assessment. An assessment doesn't mean formalized. It can be pretty informal. So the first step in the assessment is you're going to determine the child's level of abilities. Level in language skills, in their learning abilities, in their motor skills, and sensory skills. So you want to look for those things. Next, you're going to observe You want to observe it with various people and across places and settings to see how those skills. Okay, so the third step is that you involve your child, parents, so a team, and others, so your broader team, and you're going to talk about your goals, your wishes, your hopes for your child or your student. And this is where you're going to assess cultural values and things like that. After that, you should implement a dynamic assessment. And this may be a fairly new term for people. And it's a method of conducting a language assessment where you identify the skills that the individual has and their learning potential. So what prompts, what additional help do I need to do? If I use a photograph, are they better than if I use just line drawings? If I point prompt, if I use a point or a gesture, do they learn better? If I have a smaller array or a larger array, which means number of pictures you're seeing at once, is it too hard for too many pictures? But if I reduce it to 6 pictures, is that better? So you're going to play around with things as an ongoing assessment. Then you're going to conduct a feature matching, and I've got some slides on that. So you'll see what feature matching is. And then the last step really is to trial the method. So you should do a trial of 1 or 2 systems to see what does your individual child or student, what is their response to those assessments. So the other thing you should consider, should you start at low tech or go straight to high tech? There are some recommendations, and the PEC's website where you have links will have that. And the other one that can majorly impact is, are all people and places on the same page? If you're not all on the same page, you may be doing your child a disservice or the individual disservice. You're going to be working at odds with each other. They can have negative impacts. So you really need to talk about this and be honest and open. So we're going to compare systems now, and I've given you some links because there's many different kinds of AAC systems to choose from. There's different apps, there's different platforms and hardware. And again, like I said, an assessment or trial is always helpful for you. So you want to match a couple systems to the features or the skills and strengths that your child has. The link in here where it says AAC comparison chart, I'm not going to click it because it will take us there, is a link to a YouTube video about this type of resource. So it will walk you through how to use a feature matching or a comparison chart and instances where that's helpful for you. So I've got that link so you can visit that on your own. So feature matching means that you're going to achieve 2 main goals. You're going to use the skills and needs of the communicator and the family to identify key features that are needed in an AAC system. So things like, does it have a child's voice or an adult's voice? Does it have a male voice and a female voice? Can it grow along with the child? Can I change the layout or the organization? Does it have external speakers? Is it easy? Can I program it when I don't have to take the tablet away from my child? So things like that, those key features. And then you're going to match those features that you need to the technology. And what I've done is I've created an SGD setup features matrix template for you. That will be in your resources page. So it gives you an ease of comparing multiple speech generating devices or lower tech devices to determine your best fit. So you'll see in that feature matrix that across the top are all the different features that could have an impact, and down the side, down the left side of that Excel spreadsheet will be where you write, okay, I'm going to try Proloco to Go or LAMP or Touch Chat or Lingo. And there, like I said, there's lots of them. So you may want to, go and look on the website pages or on the YouTube video. She talks a lot about the features of each different one and fill out that chart. So that's something important to do as part of an assessment. So I'm going to stop here and take some questions because we have a few minutes left, and I know that there's always lots of questions. And so please either feel free to write any questions that you have. And I see there are some questions. So I am going to tackle some of them, and hopefully they'll help some of you. So question is, how teachers can go after this training, because parents learn and use, but at school this is a challenge for many reasons. Absolutely. There's often, now because of the pandemic, actually, there's online training often on all of the different devices. Many of the high-tech devices have, the companies offer training as well. Speech pathologists, behavior analysts that are used to or competent with some of these can provide training as well to the teachers if they're able to go into the school. And I know the demands on everyone's time is heavy, so that's not always an option. But definitely Picture Exchange is online training that you can access. And lots of times there's YouTube channels that have step-by-step how to do things. Can schools request this assessment? Some families don't have access to therapists. Yes. Some schools have AAC specialists. There are AAC clinics that you can make a referral to. So you can self-refer often, or speech pathologists can help you with that. And in your resources, actually in one of the following slides, it has a link to the current AAC clinics in Ontario, their inclusion criteria, and if you're allowed, and their exclusion. So you have to pick the one that's geographically and for your child's age relevant. What are your thoughts on grid sizes? Grid sizes, again, start from what your child is competent or successful with, and you're going to have to play around with that. It's not always so important to keep it looking the exact same from start to finish. It's more about, is your child able, or is that student able to understand the difference between pictures? And so no matter what happens to the layout, they're able to understand, oh, I have to look for my ball picture, maybe it's on a different page. It's like when your phone updates or when our computers update, things change. All I can tell you is don't get married to something. Think about the underlying skills that are really important. And the last question on here, how do we get people to my son's use of a high-tech AAC looks different in a one-to-one speech therapy session than in a classroom environment. How would you adjust for the use being different in different environments? Okay, so that's a more complex question. It shouldn't look different in different environments. It actually should look pretty similar. There may be pages that are used in different environments for different reasons, but really that's then like learning two different languages. What you really would like best is to get everyone on the same page and really talk about what would be best for your child, your son or daughter, because it's about them and it's about what's going to make them most successful. My daughter has progressed using an AAC device, a tablet, is getting increasingly proficient at navigating it and using it effectively. However, the school has expressed concerns that she is repeatedly pushing in long strings of words from predictive text. They seem to think she's goofing around, but I argue that she's searching, learning, listening, and I'm against eliminating that feature as she suggested. Can you address? So without knowing your daughter and actually seeing what's happening, that's very difficult for me to give you an opinion on. It's something that no professional should do. But the hallmark of using any type of AAC is that it's efficient, effective, and accurate. And learning often is something that we may teach a child to do in a specific environment, like that if they're exploring, but in a different environment, just like children are taught not to shout out in class or not to answer all the time, they need to put their hand up. I think sometimes there's behavioral things that we need to look at that may assist your daughter. Sometimes it's that they're listening and progressing. Sometimes it could be self-stimulatory behavior. So that's what I'm saying, unless I was there to do an assessment of all the environments and what she is and looking at, is it functional communication, I can't say. There is a question, the last one I'm going to answer before I let you go for today, because it's important. What does the research say on the use of core vocabulary for individuals with autism? So there is a brand new study that just came out yesterday. So this presentation was already done, but I'm going to add it for the next one. There is now a growing body of good research to say do not use core vocabulary for AAC. And it's simple. It's because core vocabulary was not established, researched on individuals with communication disorders. It was researched on typical, neurotypical individuals. Core vocabulary is at about a 3.5 to 4 year age level. And often if you have an autistic individual who is non-speaking and looking at AAC, their developmental level or developmental age is much lower. In fact, if you want to talk about a developmental age for speaking, most 12-month-olds have 5 to 10 spoken words. And so they're functioning below a 12-month age. So all the research says start where they are for language development. So we're going to start with the vocabulary important to them, their interests, their preferences, their reinforcers, which is called fringe vocabulary. What you want your child to be most successful. You also want them to use it a lot. And so they're going to use that vocabulary the most and get the most practice. And so that is what the research is now saying. Do not use core for AAC. And look forward to seeing you again in part 3 in a couple weeks, and hope everyone has a safe day if you're traveling, and have a great afternoon. Thanks, everyone.